Thank you for coming. Let me introduce myself. Some of you may know me, some not. My name is Alexander. I'm the IT manager of Space Pre. But somehow, from the first or second grade of school, when everybody dreamt of being a jet fighter pilot or a policeman or a firefighter, I somehow dreamt of being a history teacher. So the dreams did not come true eventually, as soon as I'm the IT manager of the Space Pre. But I am slowly getting there. A week ago we, let's say, celebrated, it's a great word, 100 years of the Great Revolution. It was a tectonic event that changed the course of history of Europe and the whole world in the 20th century. So I would not dare to be another one to give you a history lesson on this, because the numerous books were written, the whole events were chronicled by hundreds of people. So this will be just a foray of the state of society on the brink of a tectonic change, because it took almost 1,000 years to build this empire, and it took only 2 weeks to reduce it to ashes. So let's begin. Speaking of the revolution, of course we'll speak about the cradle of the revolution, the then capital of Russia, St. Petersburg, and this is the city of actually two revolutions, as you know. The first revolution happened from February 23rd to March 15th. That's when the government was overthrown, and the emperor resigned. So this is the text of his resignation. But it did not last long. The interim government did not get the job done, obviously. So it was replaced in October, and then it was when the how they call it, the dictature of the proletariat was proclaimed. Of course, we will speak about the first revolution that happened in February, although we celebrated the anniversary of the last one, because for me, and from my point of view, it's much more interesting, because we'll see how the society changed. So what we will speak of here, I propose we divide these materials in some kind of blocks according to the social strata, so the social layers, how we call it, of then present society. So the first one will be the Imperial Household, is the royal family and everything around it. The court is the elite that surrounded the Imperial Household. So the intellectuals of the Silver Age, in Russian we have the term intelligentsia, which is not very translatable into English, although it's usually written as is intelligentsia. These are basically the people of the intellectual world.
Intelligent people.
Yes, intelligent people. Not to mix it with intelligence, please. Peasant population of the city, because every major city attracts a lot of people from the country around it. And the social elements, yes, we can't go without them. So these are thugs, beggars, and prostitutes. I guess this will be the most interesting part, right? And the proletariat, or the working class, the skilled workers that were declared an official driving force behind the revolution. So, by 1970, Russia is the largest empire on planet Earth. So its western border is in Poland, because Poland was then Russia. Its eastern border is in Vladivostok, as it is now. Its northern border is at the very, very north, and its southern border is in Kazakhstan. So it's basically the biggest one on the planet Earth. St. Petersburg is the capital. It's the third largest city in Europe with a population over 3 million people. And at the helm of this very empire stands the royal household. According to the decree of the Emperor Alexander III, the Imperial Household consists of every sibling or every child or grandchild of the emperor ever lived. So by 1917, it amounts to 120 people. And they all go by the names of archdukes or the high princes. So here they are, just as illustration. We might actually say that this is quite a rowdy bunch. So they're not friendly sometimes to each other. There are a lot of conspiracies brewing around to overthrow one another, to steal, murder, or poison. But they somehow are very conscious of their identity, and they identify themselves as a royal family. But not everything is quite sparkly and glittery in this family. The royal court reached its peak of its glory under the rule of Alexander II, who adored the pompousness of the ceremonies. So the royal balls that happened on Christmas Eve and the New Year's Eve were unmatched in its glory and the money in the whole Europe. This is the Emperor Alexander II and his family. So as I mentioned, not everything goes well in this family, and a lot of Grand Dukes are married. Of course they're married, but they do not live with their spouses or their children. They prefer ballet dancers. So imagine this is the Tinder of that time. So the wife of Grand Duke Konstantin Nikolaevich Alexandra Yosipovna bore him 5 children. No, that did not do the job. So he preferred the Anna Kuznetsova, the prima ballerina at the Imperial Ballet. The Archduke Konstantin Nikolaevich. Yes, that's him. Round 3. So Nikolai Nikolaevich, the elder Grand Duke, he prefers Ekaterina Chislova, also a ballet dancer. So, although he was married to Alexandra Petrovna, he met this ballet dancer around 1860s, and he fell in love so much that he bought her a mansion right outside of his palace. And when she wanted to see her sugar daddy, she just put 2 candles in the window of her chambers. And that was the signal, so he went there. She also bore him 5 children, so that was a fruitful mesalliance. And everything went well, although the whole St. Petersburg knew about this story. Until the emperor, Alexander II, died of the terrorist attack, and the new emperor, Alexander III, came into power. So he sent her away because he could not tolerate such behavior. So the Emperor Alexander II, he was not a saint himself, not at all. He lived for 2 households simultaneously. He had an official mistress, Ekaterina Dolgorukova, who went alongside him for a long, long time. And since 1880, she became his official second wife. Although he was married officially, right? So, bingo. So, as I mentioned, the state of the things was like this until the new emperor came in. So the new emperor, Alexander III, you can see by his image, he was a complete other story. So he hated the ceremonies and the court. He despised them openly, preferring like hobbies like fishing or hunting or some military exercise. So I guess this qualifies for a complete image of the new emperor. But somehow he clearly understood that politics matter and manners maketh man, as they say, and that Europe must respect Russia. So the balls were much rarer, but they still happened, and the amount of money they threw at it and the festivities was unmatched once again. So, he, as for, speaking of politics and the decision-making process, he was a strong man, right? And he respected strong men. And he had a close circle of confidence that consisted of, for example, the commander of the Imperial Convoy, Vladimir Sheremetyev, the Ilarion Vorontsov, who was the Minister of the Court and the Lands, and Peter Cheverin, who was the Deputy of the Minister of Internal Affairs. And these were the people, along some others, right, who influenced the politics of Russia, internal and external at that time. So, the high society of that time, sorry, that was a little bit early. So the high society of that time consisted pretty much of 2,000 people who were the trendsetters and who really influenced what was going on inside St. Petersburg and outside of the borders of Russian Empire. So one might say that during the rule of Alexander III, the Russian Empire was put to order despite numerous wars, famines, conspiracies. The court was put to order, the Grand Dukes were put to order, because they knew what was expected of them, they behaved as was expected. So it all happened, it all changed once again very drastically when the new emperor came to power, Nikolai II. So his father, Alexander III, died an abrupt and tragic death because as far as I remember the name of the disease correct, it's called cystitis. So he just swam in cold water, got his kidney wrong, and he died. So Nikolai came to power when he was only 26 years old. As it happens in these situations when there is a strong and very opinionated father and not so strong child. He was very shy because the only image he had to look up to was his father, who was big, strong, rowdy, opinionated. And his son was, much thinner, much shyer, and much younger, of course. Because Alexander III came to power when he was already a made man, when he was in his 40s. So, Nikolai, also as it happens sometimes, married a very, let's say, bossy woman. So he had no other option as to marry a German duchess that her name was Victoria Helena Louise Beatrice von Hessen. But when she became the Russian queen, she changed her name to Alexandra Fedorovna. and we know her under this name, although she was German. I mean, she did not speak Russian at the time of their wedding. So, and right from the start, she began interfering into politics through her husband, because this approach of hers, right, managing her husband and the politics of the whole country through him, sparked a lot of disagreement among the politicians. The most influential of them being Sergei Witte and Pyotr Stolypin, that were the prime ministers, one right after another. And it happened so that she became very jealous of their power, of the power they had over her husband. And she engineered the firing of the first, of Sergei Witte, although he practically saved the emperor during the first revolution of 1906. That was like a bloodless revolution, although not very bloodless, when the constitutional monarchy was engineered. And she always, she almost made Pyotr Stolypin to resign, and his fate was already decided, but he was shot in the theater and tragically died of a terrorist attack. So, as you might understand, that was a big difference comparing to the predecessor of the current emperor, of Nikolai, because his father was a strong man. Yes, he yelled at his ministers. He used profanity language a lot. But he respected strong people with opinions. However, Nikolai was being very shy. He had a lot of problems, and he was almost incapable of telling hard things to people face to face. So before firing someone, he gradually became so kind to that person, because he knew that the inevitable was coming. And in the court, everybody knew that if the emperor is good to you, some shit's gonna happen. Here's the picture of Alexander III with his wife, just to compare to Nikolai II and his wife. Just by the image of these two people, you can see, I mean, the difference in the politics of Russia at that time. So then the problems started to snowpile on these couple. So they had 4 daughters, one right after another, and that is bad for that time, because you need to, someone needs to inherit the throne. No boys. His brother, Nikolai's brother, was deemed the successor. But then the Prince Alexei Nikolaevich is born. Everybody's getting happy, hooray, but he suffers from hemophilia. Everybody knows what's that, but the blood runs, and doesn't stop. He was almost pronounced unfit for succeeding the throne. And that, as you might understand, sparked a lot of conspiracies in the Imperial household. Because there were a lot of capable males, right? A lot of capable grand dukes who could succeed the throne. At that time, Alexandra Fedorovna had enough on her plate, and she starts looking for her own confidence, and that results in really strange people appearing in court. So these were some mages, wizards who claimed to heal the unhealable prince, and it all resulted in this man, whose name is Grigory Rasputin, and everybody knows this iconic man from the Russian history. So he was, I mean, everybody thought that he could whisper somehow the prince's blood so it stopped flowing. We don't know whether it's true or not, but he became really close to the royal family. Even now, numerous myths surround this figure because, I mean, he liked that. He liked very much to mystify himself. But one thing was true, it was of the common people. He had no manners at all. He drank a lot. He was a careless womanizer. But he was very opinionated and outspoken. And he gradually gained great influence over Alexandra Fedorovna and thus her husband and the politics of Russia through them. So this sparked a great resentment among the nobility and the royal elite and the military elite. That resulted in a plot to kill Rasputin. That was successful. So they shot him 3 times and drowned them under ice during the winter in the Neva River. And the killers were the Duke Felix Rasputin and the Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, who was the cousin of Nikolai II. So it was a nice family after all. So with the birth of Alexei and all the troubles that followed, Nikolai withdrew basically from the capital to their country residence in Tsarskoye Selo. The city and the elites and the politicians, they gradually got a feeling that the emperor is gone. That the emperor is no longer managing nor his country, nor his household, nor does he want to. So the city and the country was left up to prime ministers and the beginning hardships of the Russo-Japanese War. So the Imperial Household, at that state that Nikolai left them, they are starting to express their discontent with the emperor, like really vocally. And they do not value their family identity anymore. So they start to do the unspeakable. They start to date and marry women outside of their circle. That was prohibited actually. So that made them lose their identity as the Romanovs or successors to the throne. So the Grand Duke Mikhail Mikhailovich, who is the grandson of Nikolai I, he finds, dates and marries the granddaughter of Alexander Pushkin, Sophia Merenberg, who was not a noble person, and he loses his power to the throne, or to the family, and he flees Russia. Pavel Alexandrovich, also the Grand Duke, he secretly weds Olga von Pistolkors after being expressly prohibited to do so by the emperor, and the emperor made him sign a letter that he won't do this, but he still did it. And they fled to Switzerland, escaping the agents of the internal police, and they secretly wed. So, again, and they stay in Switzerland and in France, so they cannot return to Russia. Mikhail Alexandrovich, who was for a very long time supposed to be the successor of the throne and the brother of Nikolai, so he marries Natalie Wolfert, who was not noble at all, and he is sent outside and he's sent away, so he can't stay in Russia anymore. Kirill Vladimirovich was the cousin of Nikolai II and the most influential of the whole household. So he secretly weds Victoria Melita, And he wins her because, she was the wife of Nikolai, the second brother-in-law, the brother of his wife. So you can imagine the state of affairs in that family at that point. So, and he's also sent away. So, I guess, from this short presentation, you can sense the state of affairs in the royal family and the imperial household at that time. It was, let's say, unnerving to say the least. And the overall image of imperial family crumbles. So that's pretty much it for the royals for today. So, yes, that's how it ended in the end. Thank you for your attention. Questions if you want. And see you next Thursday.
Are there any questions?
What do you think about Grigori Rasputin? What's your personal opinion?
He came at the right time, let's say right. And he somehow quenched Alexandra Fedorovna's thirst for authoritative person beside her. So, yeah, if Grigori Rasputin was a person that appeared at the right time at the right place, it could be another person with another name. He just happened to fit in the moment. So, as for him, there are some opinions that he was a proxy after the 1905 revolution. He was a proxy between the common people and the imperials, right? But I don't think it was very true. Because, he was a very common person who, right out of a sudden, gained access to High Court and the life at High Court. I think he was very much preoccupied with himself than with doing politics.
I have two questions.
Shoot.
First one is a little bit stupid, but this Sheremetyev guy that you mentioned, is Sheremetyevo named after him, or him and the airport are named after the area?
These are two different people. His signal is Sheremetyev, not Sheremetyev. So these the Sheremetyevo was where the mansion of the dukes, Sheremetyev dukes, were, but these are completely other people. Yeah, so this guy's second name was Sheremetyev, without this yeah, or märkesnamn. Yeah, welcome to Russia.
And the second question is if you can give us a promo for what's going to be in the next lecture next Thursday.
Next Thursday we'll speak about the High Court and what happened at High Court. The elites, the military elite, because St. Petersburg at that time was a major, mostly a military city, highly militarized. A lot of, army was there. The Imperial Guards and others. So, and they constituted the elites of the government. So we'll speak about that. We'll see how things were, what ailed them, what they suffered from, how it all ended and contributed to the, this major fuck up that was called the Great Revolution. Any more questions? Oui.
You seem to say, or to let people say that the Russian Empire collapsed by itself from the head. Is it your thesis, or is it or did you have another opinion?
I know where you're going. I think you're going where, was there any external help to collapse it, right?
Not this, but when you look at former empires, I don't know for the Russian one. one, that for the Roman Empire collapsed on itself, by itself. I mean, it was not, there was an outside pressure, of course, but it was not the essential point of the collapse of the Roman Empire. And generally, empires collapse by themselves because they have internal problems. Of course, external ones don't help. But so what for this one?
So, I mean, the state of affairs in the government and the country was really, really bad. It was the First World War, the Russian-Japanese War, the aftermath of the First Revolution of 1905, the general discontent of the government and the situation. So, I mean, it was all slowly brewing for 10 years up to 1905. And so it had to burst somehow. And it would burst eventually. In 1917 or in 1918 or in 1919 or in 1916. Eventually that would happen somehow. It just happened to be that the workers at the Nefka factory on the 23rd of February 1917 thought it was a good idea to make a strike. So they hit their master, who fell unconscious. They switched off the factory, and then they went off to the streets. And so, like, everybody joined them, and that happened to be the revolution, the beginning of the revolution. In 2 weeks, it all ended up. So, yes, I think it would crumble by itself, with or without some external help.
What do you think, was it possible to prevent the revolution? For
To
example, prevent? For
To
example, another emperor, probably he will be able to prevent it or not. It was so spontaneous and so strong, so it will be possible to prevent.
Thank you. Yes, of course, I think that any political event can be prevented. And this could have been prevented if Nikolai had not withdrawn from the managing of the country and the government, let's say. If he was more strong as a person. Or, I mean, the course of politics was changed a little bit. Because, I mean, we have the examples of the monarchies that survived the 20th century, right? You know, the Brits, the Spanish, what else? The Swedes, and
Dutch,
yes.
Dane.
Yeah, the Danes. You know, the monarchies now are a joke, right? Because they have no real political power. But they survived, you know, without, and you know, the royal family survived. They have not been shot like ours. So I guess yes, it could have been prevented.
Maybe the best way to prevent revolution was not to participate in First World War, because it took too much resources, because so Russia spent too much human and material resources in this.
Yes, you are very right. Like, you know, from my point of view, you are very right, because that, you know, participation in that world war left us pretty much bloodless. And, but I mean, it happens all the time in our history. When somebody somewhere is doing something bad to Slavic people, we're like, oh, we want to help. So, I mean, it happens all the time, so it's inevitable.
But it was really obvious that Russia wasn't ready for First World War.
Yes, and it was politics. You understand that? I mean, it was all about politics. That we have to help the Slavs in the south, right? And of course, we rushed into war, and then, you know, there's no going back. So, I mean, we're the prisoners of our own opinion. But you're right. You're very, very right from my point of view. If anybody has to disagree, please.
You presented us the royal family, the household, and so on, and in a way which was kind of criticism. And but was it really different from the other monarchies in Europe at that time?
Other what?
Of the other monarchies, of the other kingdoms of Europe? Because what you told us seems to be roughly the same in France, in the UK.
Yes, exactly.
So,
So, I mean, Europe, we cannot see Russia outside of Europe. I mean, at that time it was a major European country because our family was connected to other European royalties because Nikolai's brother was the English prince, right? And his wife was German, so we're very much connected. And I mean, the processes that were brewing underwater, let's say, right? The revolutions, they were slowly brewing right across Europe. But it happened so that in Russia, that resulted in a major bloody events of October Revolution. I mean, it was not so bad in Germany, it was not so bad in England after all. So, yes, I guess you're right. The whole course of events was pretty much the same. We just ended this process up, I mean, with major fireworks. Any more questions?
Good. Are you aware of any descendants of the royal family that are still living today? And if
yeah.
there are they in Russia? Or?
I don't know. I mean, I know that they have formed some kind of, let's say, a royal family in exile. And some of them are working now as businessmen, lawyers, economists in France and the United States. So they're now just ordinary people. And a lot of them have married and remarried, so they lost their second name Romanov. But yes, they are. And they're alive and kicking.